Hello, I'm Lyndon Souls at CNN Center in Atlanta. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, a full half-hour special on the dramatic closing arguments in the O.J. Simpson case. And I'll be back with a look at the top stories right after this break.
At Kemper Securities, we want to make our new name perfectly clear. Introducing Everin Securities. Everin, a vested interest in your success.
I've heard that Windows 95 needs a lot of memory. Like, I just have a 4 megabyte PC, and, well, you know, I don't want to spend $300 buying more hard RAM. That's when I heard about SoftRAM 95. It works for Windows 95 and 3.1. Just put in a disk and a click of the mouse. I now have 8 megabytes for under $50. Hey, it's a no-brainer.
Your kid has a cold.
That's one of our vice presidents having a bad day.
Your computer has a virus.
Well, I could get a new diaper. I mean, I could try and decipher it.
The last thing you want to worry about now is paper jamming.
We're having an earthquake, I think.
So you want great white recycled content paper from Union Camp. It's as good for your business as it is for the environment. It's virtually worry-free because you've got enough to worry about.
Can I get back to you?
Great white, only from Union Camp. One less thing to worry about.
Imagine these in
color.
Gray. Gray.
tangerine.
Dark gray bar is sales.
Wedgwood blue and hunter green. You have to imagine it in color.
Sort of like the flower that's in your scarf.
Dark gray bar, projected sales. Everybody follow me?
When you need it in color.
No, I'm sorry.
At Kinko's, you can create it in color so you can show it in color. Kinko's, your branch office, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Let's go over this again.
Sunday, the heart-rending story of three couples desperate to adopt a child.
You almost feel like they're going to the highest bidder.
They'll do whatever it takes to win the baby chase. On the next CNN Presents, Sunday, 9 Eastern.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lyndon Souls at CNN Center in Atlanta. We'll have a special report on the O.J. Simpson trial at the bottom of the hour, live from Los Angeles. First, this news update. At the White House today, former enemies spoke of peace and did something to help turn those words into reality. CNN senior White House correspondent Wolf Blitzer reports on the latest agreement signed by the leaders of Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization.
With their 450-page document signed, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat shook hands in the White House, but this time it was more robust, less grudging than 2 years ago when President Clinton had to almost physically force them into it. The Palestinian leader didn't back away from his long-standing positions on the need for an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital, or his opposition to Israeli settlers on the West Bank. But he did promise to end the violence once and for all.
From this day on, we do not want to see any waste of or threat to any innocent Palestinian life or any innocent Israeli life. Enough killing and enough killing of innocent people.
With his own country deeply divided, Rabin appealed directly to Arafat to fight Palestinian terrorists opposed to the peace process.
Together, we should not let the land flowing that's flowing with milk and honey become a land flowing with blood and tears. Don't let it happen.
The agreement calls for an Israeli military withdrawal from most of the heavily populated Palestinian centers on the West Bank, though the Israelis will remain in control of the Jewish settlements and the largely uninhabited but strategic high ground along the Jordan River. President Clinton promised his administration will remain a full partner.
Because they broke so bravely with the past, the bridges have multiplied. Bridges of communication, of commerce, of understanding. Today, the landscape changes and the chasm narrows.
Other witnesses, Jordan's King Hussein and Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, both of whom have already signed peace treaties with Israel. And international support came from Russia, the European Union, Japan, and Norway, which played a key role in brokering the initial Israeli PLO agreement. But conspicuously missing were the presidents of Syria and Lebanon. Negotiations between Israel and those countries are stalled. Everyone agrees there's still a long way to go, but they're encouraged these signing ceremonies, once unthinkable, are becoming almost routine. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, the White House.
In the West Bank, it was hard to find any signs of rejoicing about today's peace agreement. Polls show 70% of that area's Palestinians support the peace process, but rock-throwing protesters were in front of the cameras today, and fear of terrorist bombers forced Israel to close border crossings. Israeli settlers demonstrated their unhappiness with the agreement as well. They believe Israel should have the same borders it did in biblical times. Congressman Mel Reynolds was sentenced today to 5 years in prison for criminal sexual assault, child pornography, and obstruction of justice. A Chicago judge told the two-term Illinois congressman, quote, "You threw it away," end quote. This after Reynolds delivered an angry statement saying he had been shackled, quote, "like my slave ancestors," end quote. Reynolds was convicted last month of having sex with a 16-year-old campaign worker. He is appealing, but has said he will resign from Congress October 1st. Highly explosive hydrogen gas escaped from the Space Shuttle Columbia today as NASA fueled it for a planned liftoff. The crew of 7 astronauts had not yet boarded the craft. The leak in a main engine valve forced a launch postponement of at least 1 week's time. The baseball season came to an end today for Kirby Puckett of the Minnesota Twins. Puckett was hit in the face by a pitch from the Indians' Dennis Martinez and suffered a broken jaw. Martinez later apologized. Puckett's jaw should heal in 4 to 6 weeks' time. And just a reminder that coming up at the bottom of the hour, we will have a live special from Los Angeles on the dramatic closing arguments today in the O.J. Simpson trial. And we'll be back in a moment.
The heartrending story of 3 couples desperate to adopt a child, doing whatever it takes to win the baby chase. CNN presents Sunday.
Hi, I'm John DeGrasse from Thornley DeGrasse Rigging Company. Steve Thornley and I have been in business for the past 15 years, and we know what it takes to move equipment.
Thornley DeGrasse offers a complete line of rigging, trucking, storing, and crating services. Our flatbed, tilt trailer, forklift, and crane service can easily accommodate any move. Thornley DeGrasse also handles installations and removal, serving locally as well as the 48 states and imports. Thornley DeGrasse, 171 Dunnell Avenue, Pawtucket.
Remember, we always do what we say we'll do.
Rhode Islanders know what to look for in a law firm. They don't have to be told. That's why they choose the firm with a 20-year reputation for commitment. Lovett, Sheffrin, Galogli, and Harnett. The partners listen. Lovett Talks Law gives them plenty of practice. They talk to you, answer your questions, work with you. They're dedicated lawyers, working hard, because you're worth it. Lovett, Sheffrin, Galogli, and Harnett. 863-8800.
Da Vende Ravioli, la qualità vi dice che vi teniamo a cuore. Pasta fresca da ricette antiche ha il proprio carattere speciale. Mozzarella fresca, assaggiate la differenza. Una salumeria autentica italiana, formaggi e salumi importati. Il pane casereccio dal nostro forno alla vostra tavola fa parte di un pranzo indimenticabile. Vende Ravioli, la tradizione continua, nel cuore di Federal Hill a Providence.
It's a giant used car clearance. Tasco Lincoln Mercury's Used Car Center has reduced the price of every single car for September's used car sellout. Prices from $79.95. Save up to $15,000 on Lincoln Town Cars. Save up to $7,000 on Mercury Sables, Villagers, Cougars, Grand Marquis, other domestic models too. Every used car is clearance priced at Tasco Lincoln Mercury's Used Car Center, 200 Fall River Avenue in Seacon.
this scourge became one of the worst people in the history of this world, Adolf Hitler.
Simpson lawyer Johnny Cochran sets off a furor outside courtroom walls when he compares a former L.A. detective to Adolf Hitler. Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Moray in Los Angeles. The defense has finished its final argument. Judge Lanzito says the case will go to the jury tomorrow afternoon. Court is now adjourned for the evening. Prosecutor Marcia Clark gets her final turn before the jury tomorrow morning. Let's look back now at the moments today in the trial. Johnny Cochran wound up his remarks before the jury just over an hour ago, quoting the book of Proverbs, asking for the guidance of God, and giving the jurors a list of 15 questions. Cochran says if the prosecution cannot answer these 15 questions tomorrow, the jury must acquit Orenthal James Simpson of murder.
Let me go over these 15 questions with you just briefly. 1. Why? They're on the monitor. Did the blood show up on the sock? Almost 2 months after a careful search for evidence. And why, as demonstrated by Dr. Lee and Professor McDonald, was the blood applied when there was no foot in it? Think that's a fair question? In this case, let's see if she can answer that question. Question number 2. Why was Mark Furman, a detective who'd been pushed off the case, the person who went by himself to the Bronco over the fence to interrogate Cato, to discover the glove in the thump, thump, thump area? Number 3, why was the glove still moist when Furman found it? If Mr. Simpson had dropped it 7 hours earlier, as Agent Bodziak told you, Sir McDonald has told you, blood dries very rapidly. 4, if Mark Furman would speak so openly about his intense genocidal racism to a relative stranger, such as Kathleen Bell, how many of his co-workers, the other detectives in this case, were also aware that he lied when he denied using the N-word, yet failed to come forward? Part of Barry Schenk's 4th C of continuing cover-up. 5, why did the prosecution not call a single police officer to rebut police photographer Rokar's testimony that Detective Furman was pointing at the glove before Furman went to Rockingham? That is around 4:30 in the morning. 6, if the glove had been dropped on the walkway at Rockingham 10 minutes after the murder, why is there no blood or fiber on that south walkway or on the lead the glove was resting on? Why is there no blood from the 150 feet of narrow walkway or on the stucco wall abutting it? And you've been back there. Number 7, for what purpose was Van Adder carrying Mr. Simpson's blood in his pocket for 3 hours and a distance of 25 miles instead of booking it down the hall at Parker Center? Number 8, why did Deputy District Attorney Hank Goldberg, in a desperate effort to cover up for the missing 1.5 milliliters of Mr. Simpson's blood, secretly go out to the home of police nurse Thanoparatus without notice to the defense and get him to contradict his previous sworn testimony at both the grand jury and the preliminary hearing? Paratus was never sworn. We were never given notice. 9, why, if according to Ms. Clark, he walked into his own house wearing the murder clothes and shoes, is there not any soil or so much as a smear or drop of blood associated with the victim on the floor, the white carpeting, the doorknob, the light switches, and his bedding? 10, if Mr. Simpson had just killed Mr. Goldman in a bloody battle involving more than 24 knife wounds where Mr. Goldman remained standing and struggling for several minutes, how come there is less than 7/10 of 1 drop of blood consistent with Mr. Goldman found in the Bronco? Number 11, why, following a bitter struggle allegedly with Mr. Goldman, were there no bruises or marks on O.J. Simpson's body? And you'll have those photographs back in the jury room. Number 12, why do bloodstains with the most DNA not show up until weeks after the murder? Those on the socks, those on the back gate, those are two major areas. Number 13, why did Mark Furman lie to us? Why did Phil Van Adder lie to us? And finally, 15, given Professor McDonald's testimony that the gloves would not have shrunk, no matter how much blood was smeared on them, and given that they never shrank from June 21st, 1994 until now, despite having been repeatedly frozen and thawed, how come the gloves just don't fit?
Let's go to our legal analyst now for some perspective on how Johnny Cochran did today. Joining us from our Washington bureau is Greta Van Susteren, a trial attorney, and Roger Cossack, a former prosecutor and defense attorney. Roger, this 15 questions, is similar to a challenge, isn't it, to Marcia Clark?
Absolutely, Jim, and what it does is it forces Marcia Clark to use time to answer those questions that she may not necessarily have wanted to use that time for. You know, this is the end, and the jury's heard it all and seen it all, and you know, frankly, they probably have, there's probably nothing Marcia can say that's going to sway their opinion one way or the other, but Marcia is forced into answering these 15 questions, and as I've told you before, it's one of the oldest tricks in the books that a defense lawyer can do, because we don't get that final chance. A defense lawyer only gets one shot. So by forcing the prosecutor to answer these questions, in effect, it's tailoring her rebuttal and making her answer and play on your field.
Well, Greta, there's a bit of a time crunch for the prosecution because the judge has promised the jury it will get this case tomorrow. So Marcia Clark only has so much time. If she spends too much time on these questions, she may be diverted from her other points.
Well, that's true, but I don't think she's truly limited in terms of time. I think Judge Ito wants to get it to the jury by tomorrow night. I think probably Marcia Clark wants to get it to the jury. But I also know that if history is any indication of how Judge Ito runs his courtroom, that if Marcia Clark needs more time than Friday, I'm sure she'll get it.
How do you think that Johnny Cochran did? Was it more style over substance, or was there a great deal of substance, in your opinion, Greta?
Well, you know, Jim, there's no doubt he scored an enormous number of points against the prosecution, but, you know, he doesn't have the burden that Marcia Clark does. He merely has to identify reasonable doubt. It's Marcia Clark who has the big job. She's got to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and I think that Johnny Cochran and Barry Scheck put a 2x4 right into that prosecution case. The real question, though, is can Marcia Clark repair the damage that was done? Can she explain away all the problems that Johnny Clark and Barry Scheck created for her? And that's the true test. You know, it always looks great after you've heard one side, but we're going to hear from the prosecution again, so there may be maybe a change in opinion even after the prosecution goes one more time. But the defense clearly hurt the prosecution today.
Jim, let me just put something in perspective for you, and this really has to do with this case, but in all cases. You know, we talk about how heavy that burden of proof is and that they have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's true. But the vast majority of cases end up in convictions. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles gets a conviction rate well into the 90%. The District Attorney in Los Angeles County gets a conviction rate, I would say, certainly in the 90s, if not the high 80%. So you have to understand, while it sounds like an overwhelming thing to accomplish, this proof beyond a reasonable doubt, jurors most of the time don't have any trouble with it.
Thank you, Roger. Well, many people have said that Cochran's final arguments reminded them of a fiery preacher from the pulpit. And over the course of his final presentation before the jury, Cochran often quoted the Bible and made references to God. That continued today through the final moments of Cochran's presentation.
In times like these, we often turn to the Bible for some answers to try to figure out. You've got situations like this and you want to get an answer and you want to try to understand. I happen to really like the book of Proverbs. And in Proverbs, it talks a lot about false witnesses. It says that a false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape.
Simpson lawyer Barry Scheck began his part of closing arguments this morning. As the Simpson team's DNA expert, Scheck's presentation was far more technical and detailed than Johnny Cochran's. But Scheck was careful to echo Cochran's theme, saying the evidence had been tampered with, contaminated, and is worthless.
There is something wrong. There's something terribly wrong about this evidence. Somebody manufactured evidence in this case. There's missing blood. There's EDTA. There's questions, serious, deeply troubling questions. You must distrust it. You have to distrust it. You cannot render a verdict in this case of beyond a reasonable doubt on this kind of evidence. Because if you do, no one's safe. No one. The Constitution means nothing. This cannot, will not, shall not happen in this country with you good people. It just won't.
Greta, Barry Scheck was very detailed in his portion of the closing arguments. Is there a risk in being too technical?
Well, there dangerously is so when you're actually delivering it, but I think once the jury gets into the jury room to discuss the case, I think if Barry Scheck has run them into the ground with too much detail, they will have forgotten it. You know, Barry Scheck thinks it's important to identify all the mistakes. Perhaps it was. I think he could have done it in much quicker amount of time, but I think the important thing is to get those facts out. If that's important to the defense argument, they claim it is, and I think the jury will forgive him when it comes time for deliberating.
Roger, Barry Scheck and Johnny Cochran clearly have very different styles, but Barry Scheck was no less passionate than Johnny Cochran, at least toward the end.
No, that's right, and you know, Barry Scheck could never do what Johnny Cochran does. Very few of us can. I think that those who would try and imitate Johnny Cochran without having that ability to do it would look like a phony in front of the jury. So each lawyer who addresses the jury has to do it to their own style and hope that they can come across and convince the jury by their style. We saw Chris Darden, an entirely different style, but certainly every bit as intense and as emotional and as with as much feeling as Johnny Cochran had.
We'll be back with more of our special look at today's developments in the closing arguments of the Simpson trial. Stay with us.
Falling price. What would it sound like?
A crash. The prices do fall. They fall.
First it's like 12 cents, then it goes to 10, then it goes to 9. I think it was $45.96, now only $22.96.
It was $59.76, it is now $54.97.
It was $28.96, it's now $24.96.
We like our customers and we want to give them a good deal.
Watch your falling prices!
When a person suffers a stroke, the blood flow to the brain is reduced or cut off. Then a chain of chemical reactions known as the glutamate cascade causes severe damage to brain tissue. Once this occurs, your body is defenseless. But there is hope. Drug therapy may be able to stop the destruction of brain cells in the crucial hours after a stroke. We're working on it. Call today for a free booklet on stroke from America's pharmaceutical research companies.
It's no surprise there's a printer in town who can print memo pads and invoices. But what might surprise you is that the same printer can also do multicolor printing, presentation materials, high-volume copying, and everything you see here. An even bigger surprise is that this very same printer is right around the corner. Pip Printing. You'll be surprised at what we can do. Order 1,000 or more carbonless business forms and get 500 more of the same free.
Imagine an automobile engineered to such precise tolerances, it feels as if it were formed from a single piece of steel. Introducing the all-new 1996 Mercury Sable. The all-new Mercury Sable. Imagine something better.
Imagine yourself in a Mercury.
Simpson trial is in recess until tomorrow morning, but for more on what was going on inside and outside the courtroom on this crucial day in the trial, we go live to the Criminal Courts Building and CNN's Don Knapp. Don?
Jim, Simpson attorney Robert Shapiro left the courthouse a little more than an hour ago, met with reporters, took one question, and essentially tried to put the best spin on Cochran's closing argument.
When I made my first appearance in this case 16 months ago, I asked everybody to be patient, to wait till all the evidence was in, before they made or reached any conclusions. We're at that point, and now it's up to 12 people who have dedicated a year of their lives to the system of justice to make a decision. It's our hope that they will reach a verdict, and we firmly believe that on each and every crucial piece of evidence that the prosecution has presented, there is clearly a reasonable doubt.
CNN's Bob Vito was inside the courtroom as Cochran delivered his closing argument. He says that the jurors apparently were mesmerized by Cochran's style, and he said that when it was all over, there appeared to be a great release of air with the jurors settling back in their seats, relaxing, and then looking toward the courtroom audience over towards the Goldmans. Vito also said that Patty Goldman appeared to be comforting her father, Fred Goldman. Jim?
Thank you, Don. Among the most memorable and controversial of Johnny Cochran's remarks this morning, Simpson's lead lawyer decided to compare the racism of former Detective Mark Fuhrman to that of Germany's Third Reich.
There was another man not too long ago in the world who had those same views, who wanted to burn people, who had racist views and ultimately had power over people in his country. People didn't care. People said he's just crazy, he's just a half-baked painter. They didn't do anything about it. This man, this scourge, became one of the worst people in the history of this world, Adolf Hitler. Because people didn't care, didn't try to stop him. He had the power over his racism and his anti-religionism. Nobody wanted to stop him, and it ended up in World War II. The conduct of this man. And so, Fuhrman, to take all black people now and burn them, or bomb them. That's genocidal racism.
When Johnny Cochran brought up the name of Adolf Hitler, he unleashed a new controversy outside the courtroom and sparked a bitter exchange between two families in this case. Let's go back to the criminal courts building for more with CNN's Don Knapp. Don?
Jim, Johnny Cochran's emotional comparison of Mark Fuhrman to Adolf Hitler triggered a chain reaction of responses from family members. First, Fred Goldman, the father of murder victim Ron Goldman, came downstairs, held a news conference in which he attacked Cochran. And then members of Simpson's family came down and defended Cochran. First, let's hear from Fred Goldman.
This man is a horror walking around amongst us, and he compares what Mark Fuhrman did to misery from the beginnings of history. This man ought to be ashamed of himself to walk amongst decent human beings. This man is a disgrace to human beings. No. He is one of the most disgusting human beings I have ever had to listen to in my life.
It's very shocking that once Johnny gets up and starts telling what we feel happened, that this has rocked somebody's world. I think it's time for everybody to wake up and realize that we are in a for real world, and we have dealt with racism all our lives, every single day. And if someone cannot accept the fact that we have Mark Fuhrmans walking around in this world who has collected all of the vital evidence, and they say that he is not important in this case, they're living in a fantasy world.
The Simpsons' other sister, Shirley Baker, said that the family of O.J. Simpson has been very quiet and dignified throughout all of this while they've listened to charges against the defense team and against Cochran. They said they're not going to take it anymore. When they hear things, they're going to come downstairs and they're going to talk about it. Jim?
Thank you. That's CNN's Don Knapp at the Criminal Courts Building. Let's check in again with our legal analyst. First, Roger Cossack, do you think that Johnny Cochran stepped over the line in comparing Mark Fuhrman with Adolf Hitler?
Jim, I don't think so. I think Adolf Hitler is a terrible human being and a despicable human being. I think Mark Fuhrman's a despicable human being for what he did and certainly for the way he lied and for his thoughts. I think it's ridiculous to compare Mark Fuhrman to Adolf Hitler. But what I really think is that Fred Goldman has to be viewed with compassion and with love. As I've said before, I cannot believe and I cannot think of anything worse in this world than to have your son or your child brutally murdered. And what I saw of Fred Goldman was, you know, live on TV, I saw a man's heart break right in front of the camera. And I think in that sense, we have to forgive him, and we have to love him, and we just have to understand what he has gone through.
Greta Van Susteren, what's your reaction to what has become battling news conferences between these families?
I think it's completely predictable and understanding, especially since the media is willing to listen to them and entertain what they have to say. But in many ways, Jim, I think it's important for people who follow this trial to see and hear what these people have to say, because I think you get a better understanding of what it really is like to go through a trial for these people. It's not simply what we see in the courtroom. There's a lot of personal tragedy involved in it, and we've seen it by virtue of these two news conferences. Now, having said that, I do hope that the jury hears nothing about this, because the jury has a different role. They're supposed to be dispassionate. They're to judge the evidence. They're not to be poisoned by anyone's personal feelings. And while these families have very strong and personal feelings like anyone would, I hope that the jury hears nothing of it and deliberates on this case in a cold and dispassionate way and reaches a fair verdict.
You know, Jim, we talk about violence on television or violence in the media, and the criticism is that we don't really see what it means. And, you know, people say, well, why do you put the camera in the courtroom? You know why you put the camera in the courtroom? Because you learn something. You learn from Fred Goldman what death really means. You learn the things that you don't see in movies. You see that when someone dies, there's a grieving parent, there's a grieving mother, there's a grieving sister. You see the other side. You see when someone goes on trial, you see how his family is and the pain they go through. So there always is something that we can get out of this.
And we'll be back with more of our special look at the O.J. Simpson trial right after these words.
Imagine hearing the call of the road, not the road itself. Imagine having the world at your fingertips. Imagine worrying less and enjoying more. Imagine an automobile so precisely engineered it feels as if it were formed from a single piece of steel. Introducing the all-new 1996 Mercury Sable.
What if you combine a vacuum cleaner and bagpipes? Maybe not. Okay, how about a porcupine and a recliner? Whoops. Okay, a high-speed copier and a tower of paper. Ah, the Konica 6190. Touchscreen control, 90 copies per minute, huge paper capacity. That's technology that makes sense, only from Konica.
When you call internationally with MCI, you can reach virtually everyone, everywhere.
Bonjour.
Ni hao.
G'day. Enjoy a clear connection, no matter how far away.
Yes, we're going out to dinner tonight. Mucho tu nieto.
Get help anytime, day or night. And continue to get the lowest priced international call to every number you've selected. MCI's friends and family worldwide, keeping you connected.
Discover the feeling of Fix-It Fresh. A stronger, longer hold. A more secure, fresh approach to wearing dentures. And the fresh sensation gives you the confidence to live life without limits. Try a fresh approach.
CNN's Art Harris spoke with L.A. Police Detective Tom Lang, and he joins us from the Criminal Courts building in Los Angeles. Art, Tom Lang has kept a very low profile, but he did speak to you today. What did he tell you?
He was very angry, Jim. He said that after Johnny Cochran sounded like a fiery tent preacher calling cops devils of deception, Lang said Cochran to him sounded like a preacher turned snake oil salesman, and he had very harsh words. He said that it's gone beyond disingenuous, and this is quoting Tom Lang, one of the lead detectives. He said that, that his charge that there was a conspiracy of cops out to frame Simpson's, quote, out-and-out lies. He called them smears and nonsense, disgusting, unbelievable. He said, quote, to throw out this crap, he's a hypocrite. And, Jim, he was especially concerned about linking Detective Van Adder and Mark Furman. He said that, and I won't use this word on television, but the abbreviation is BS.
He's also, I believe, concerned about the safety of the community and the impact of the community, isn't he?
He was really concerned that here you have a defense lawyer who is putting his client ahead of concerns of the community and really inflaming the community. In fact, his quote, Tom Lang, the detective, said, "They'd just as soon L.A. burned down." Jim?
Art, Christopher Darden told you that they had somewhat of a truth squad in the courtroom trying to count any inconsistencies that the defense might have in its final arguments. What have they told you so far?
Well, we reported that the prosecution on the 18th floor has a number of investigators and deputy district attorneys monitoring Johnny Cochran's every word and Barry Scheck's every word in an attempt to catch them in contradictions and misrepresentations. And tonight he just told us that they counted more than 50 contradictions. They plan to sit down tonight in their war room and go over what Marcia Clark and Chris Darden's response tomorrow will be to what they see as misrepresentations of their case.
And did Marcia Clark briefly tell you what she planned?
Well, she was as she was leaving court today, I asked her which contradiction she planned to highlight, and she just shook her head, and she had only two words, Jim. She said, quote, "Oh, God."
Thank you. That's CNN's Art Harris at the Criminal Courts Building. Greta Van Susteren, we understand that the jurors will be deliberating beginning on Monday, and it will go Monday through Saturday from 9 to 5 Pacific. What does that tell you, if anything, about the potential length of these deliberations?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Do you have any sense, or is it simply foolish to guess?
I've tried cases, Jim, for 15 years, and any guess would be completely ridiculous.
Roger, the judge did ask for input on whether or not the jurors wanted to deliberate at night. Apparently, he has come to the conclusion that it would be more beneficial for them to just go 9 to 5, Monday through Saturday. Does that tell you anything at all?
Jim, what it really tells me is, knowing full well what our schedule is, it means that you and I will have and Greta will have the nights off, but are going to be hanging around the studio 6 days a week.
Is this a very difficult time for the jury? We know that they've been sequestered since January 11th, but the real fighting will begin, won't it?
You know, Jim, this is going to be a difficult time, but I have to tell you, I have a theory, and, you know, who knows, but I think this jury's going to come to a verdict, and the reason I think that is because I just think they've been at this too long to give up without a verdict. So, you know, there it is, and for whatever it's worth, and believe me, this is a real guess.
Thank you, Roger and Greta. And as the O.J. Simpson trial comes to a conclusion, we'd like to invite you to watch some new shows. Two familiar faces to trial watchers, Roger and Greta, will host Burden of Proof. That will air at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 Pacific. Now, Judge Ito has promised the jury will get the case tomorrow after the prosecution's rebuttal. Of course, CNN will bring that rebuttal to you live, beginning when court resumes at noon Eastern. That's 9 a.m. Pacific. Up next is World News, and at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific, we'll have a half-hour special recapping the day's developments in the Simpson trial. I'm Jim Moray in Los Angeles.
This fall, watch the news the world will be watching. Worldview, the global newscast, weeknights this fall on CNN.
I wonder, if hassle-free is a car dealer's new policy, what was his old one? A hassle policy? Come on. Common courtesy shouldn't even require a special policy. It should be perfectly natural. So why go to a place where you have to wait for a special edict not to hassle you to come down from upstairs when you can come to a Viking dealership instead? Because at Viking, everyday courtesy is an everyday occurrence. It doesn't require a board meeting. At Viking, we're with you for the long haul.
At Vendor Ravioli, quality is our way of saying we care. From old world recipes, we create a variety of fresh pasta, each with its own special character. Fresh mozzarella cheese, taste the difference. Treat yourself to an Italian deli full of imported cheeses and cold cuts. Fresh baked breads, hot from our oven to your table, make eating a memorable experience. Vendor Ravioli, the tradition continues in the heart of Providence's Federal Hill.
Go ahead, make a wish. Then have your Allstate agent outline a life insurance plan that makes it all come true. Trust your dreams to your Allstate agent, who wants to be your agent for life.
There's an Allstate agent in your neighborhood ready to serve you. In Cranston, contact David Costa. In Johnston, contact Ronald Ormerod. And in Providence, contact Bob Russo.
If you're shopping for a new or pre-owned car, don't be fooled by newspaper ads that sound too good to be true. At Knight's Nissan, we don't use gimmicks. We have 7 experienced Nissan certified salespeople and 9 factory certified technicians and advisors. If there's one thing that hasn't changed in 25 years as a Nissan dealer, it's knowing how to offer good, honest deals and superior service. Do business with the Nissan professionals at Knight's Nissan.
This is CNN.
Nobody outside here has a boat. You have that boat, thank heaven. These narrow-minded people, thank heaven they don't have a vote. You will have the final say.
And the jury will have that final say beginning tomorrow. It is the beginning of the end of the O.J. Simpson trial.
The congressman convicted in a sex scandal gets a prison sentence and a lecture. We'll find out what the judge said to Mel Reynolds.
And if experts agree this pill would help some people lose weight, why won't they approve it for sale in the U.S.? We'll tell you.
Good evening, I'm Bobby Batista.
And I'm Lyndon Souls. This is CNN World News. At times, he sounded more like he was delivering a sermon than a summation. O.J. Simpson's lead attorney, Johnny Cochran, thundered through his closing argument, imploring the jury to acquit his client. Outside the courtroom, Ronald Goldman's father took issue with Cochran's pleas, and O.J. Simpson's family took issue with what Goldman had to say. CNN's Jim Hill has details.
O.J. Simpson's lead trial attorney ended 2 days of his closing arguments with impassioned words for the jury.
The same God for all people, keeping watch above his own. He watches all of us, and he'll watch you in your decision. Thank you for your attention. God bless you.
Cochran spent most of the day filling the courtroom with emotion and controversy.
Stop this cover-up! Stop this cover-up!
Members of the victims' families and a stern-faced police detective listened as Johnny Cochran called O.J. Simpson a victim of police corruption and racism. He said jurors had a chance to change history, do the right thing, and free O.J. Simpson as a message to police.
This man, O.J. Simpson, is entitled to an acquittal. You cannot believe these people. You can't trust the message. You can't trust the messengers.
Cochran hammered at former detective Mark Furman, who lied about not using racial slurs. Cochran likened him to Adolf Hitler.
Furman, to take all black people now and burn them, or bomb them. That's genocidal racism. Is that ethnic purity? What is that? What is that? We're paying this man's salary.
During a break in court, the father of victim Ronald Goldman angrily spoke out against Cochran.
And it's because of racism we should put aside all other thought, all other reason, and set his murdering client free. He's a sick man.
The family of O.J. Simpson gave an equally emotional response to Goldman.
We are a crime victim as well as the Browns and the Goldman family. When we sat in that courtroom and we see pictures of Nicole, we hurt. When we sat in the courtroom and we see our brother at arm's reach, we've not been able to touch him, to hug him, to comfort him, we hurt.
Jewish leaders in Los Angeles even entered the fray and attacked Johnny Cochran's closing argument.
To make that leap from a Furman to a Hitler is simply put, it's inappropriate.
Sources close to the defense say there were renewed threats Thursday, and Cochran's law office building locked its doors and increased security. Cochran has been guarded for several days by Nation of Islam members because of reported threats. Meanwhile, in court, Simpson attorney Barry Scheck attacked the DNA and other scientific evidence against Simpson. He told the jury contaminated evidence is unreliable and not enough to convict.
That something is wrong. Something is terribly wrong with the most important pieces of evidence in this case. It is a cancer that is infecting the heart of this case.
At the end of the day, Cochran returned for a final word to the jury, mentioning Simpson's 2 young children.
Someone has taken these children's mother. I certainly hope that your decision doesn't take their father.
Prosecutors are set to deliver their rebuttal argument on Friday. Judge Lance Ito told the jury, after hearing more than 8 months of testimony, it's about to begin deliberations.
I will instruct you, and the case will be yours tomorrow afternoon.
Jim Hill for CNN Los Angeles.
And as we have throughout the trial, we will bring you a half-hour wrap-up of today's developments immediately following World News. And CNN resumes live coverage tomorrow at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Leaders in the Middle East have taken another step toward fulfilling the ancient prophecy of beating swords into plowshares. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and PLO Chief Yasser Arafat signed an agreement reducing Israel's military presence and expanding Palestinian autonomy in the West Bank. The signing took place at the White House, where CNN's Steve Hurst has the first of our 2 reports on today's historic milestone.
The U.S. leaders who helped shepherd the Israelis and Palestinians to this historic signing at the White House took rightful pride in their role as honest brokers in one of the most intractable international snarls of this century. But while huge sums already are being given to Israel and Egypt by the U.S. for making peace 17 years ago, very little has been offered up to the bankrupt Palestinians, and no troops are promised to help police the peace, as happened in the Sinai.
I welcome you to
President Clinton heralded the expanding peace while looking forward to bringing the Syrians into the process.
We will press forward with our efforts until the circle of peace is closed, a circle which must include Syria and Lebanon if peace is to be complete.
The Israelis know U.S. muscle will be essential if Syrian President Hafez al-Assad is to be moved off the dime. They joined their U.S. counterparts in turning up the heat on Damascus.
In order for this picture to be completed and for the Middle East to become a jewel in the world crown, it still lacks 2 people, the President of Syria and the President of Lebanon.
A thicket of problems lay before the Palestinians and the Israelis before their peace can be complete. And key to peace, says a man instrumental in getting the process this far, is patience.
One thing about this negotiation, much like the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation, you can't rush it. What has to exist is a sense of commitment and a sense of urgency on the part of the parties. When that exists, the potential to move ahead will exist.
For the U.S. Secretary of State, who has made Middle East peace the centerpiece of his tenure, nothing focuses his attention like the Syrians. Christopher has made 13 shuttle diplomacy missions to the region since taking office, and his aides say he is determined to get a deal between Jerusalem and Damascus before he leaves office. That's always a rub in the web-like negotiating process that goes with the Middle East territory. The United States played a pivotal role in keeping the Israelis and Palestinians on track, and now the focus turns to Syria and breaking down decades of mistrust and obstinacy on both sides. Steve Hurst, CNN, the White House.
In Hebron, young Palestinian boys sung their national anthem as the dream of Palestinian statehood took a giant step forward in Washington. But because neither side got everything it wanted, the protests continued. Islamic militants are threatening to wage a holy war to destroy the accord with Israel, but the radical strength may be waning as Palestinians see they may indeed be getting rid of Israeli military occupation and getting land for peace. But land is exactly what right-wing Israelis don't want to give up, and they staged a protest against the Washington signing. Their ideological dream of an Israel with its biblical boundaries was shattered by the Washington signing, and they are vowing to do everything they can to wreck the agreement. Israel's right-wing politicians held their own counter-signing ceremony. They signed a mock document nullifying the White House agreement.
There's no rejoicing in the people of Israel today. Maybe there are celebrations in Washington with manicured lawns and balloons, but the people of Israel aren't happy because they don't feel this is a real peace.
It's true, polls show only 51% of Israelis support the agreement, but people here have been disillusioned by radical Palestinian suicide bombings.
Count how many people died during these 2 years. So actually there's no result, there's no positive result.
Maybe this is the beginning of the end of Israel.
On the day of the signing, Israel sealed off the West Bank and Gaza, turning away Palestinians because it was feared Islamic militants would attempt to mar the peace signing with a suicide bombing. Still, a bare majority of Israelis seem willing to give peace a second chance.
There are many ways to die, but there is only one way to live, and the peace process is the only way to live.
In West Bank Palestinian cities, where 70% of the people support the continuing peace process, the same hope was echoed.
I think that's what we're waiting for. I hope it's going to be better.
At the tomb of the patriarchs, where Abraham, the common father of Arabs and Israelis, is buried, and in Palestinian neighborhoods nearby, Jews and Muslims echoed their separate prayers for this peace agreement.
May God make it success.
I pray to the one God in heaven that there will really be peace. and that brothers can live together happily and raise their families and their children in a proper way.
With this agreement, Israel and the Palestinians have crossed a threshold, but it is a fragile threshold. The process may be irreversible, but extremist violence from either side could yet paralyze the movement toward reconciliation. Walter Rogers, CNN, Jerusalem.
In the U.S., Congressman Mel Reynolds has been ordered to spend 5 years in prison for criminal sexual assault, child pornography, and obstruction of justice. A Chicago judge told the lawmaker from Illinois, quote, "You threw it away," end quote. This after Reynolds delivered an angry statement saying he had been shackled, quote, "like my slave ancestors," end quote. Reynolds was convicted last month of having sex with a campaign worker when she was just 16. He is appealing, but still plans to resign from Congress effective Sunday.
A panel of scientists is debating whether to recommend the government approve the first new diet drug in the United States in 20 years. The drug is called dexfenfluramine, and it appears to help many patients lose weight, even though those who have failed with other methods. CNN's Eugenia Halsey reports.
Helen Dana has been on countless diets, only this time she thinks she'll succeed. Why? Because about a month ago, her doctor helped jumpstart her new eating and exercise program with a pill called fenfluramine.
I have lost more weight in that time than I did prior to the prescription medication. And it has, like in 1 week, about, 7-8 pounds came off right away.
Many other patients have fenfluramine success stories. But the drug is only approved for short-term use, that is 3 months. Now, the Food and Drug Administration is considering approving a variation of the drug called dexfenfluramine. It would be the first diet drug allowed for long-term use or indefinitely, and the first new diet pill of any kind approved in the United States in 20 years. One scientist told an expert panel advising the FDA, obesity is the second leading killer of Americans behind smoking, and it's time to start treating some of the most extreme cases with dietary changes and drugs.
Drug therapy is a valuable tool, especially for the large numbers of individuals who've failed repeatedly to lose weight and to maintain that lost weight.
A Massachusetts-based company called Interneuron is seeking approval of dexfenfluramine. The company says studies have shown the drug, when combined with diet and exercise, helps patients lose up to twice as much weight as they did on other diet plans. It works by boosting levels of serotonin in the brain, which curbs patients' craving for snacks. They feel full, so they eat less. Side effects such as dry mouth and diarrhea appear to be mild, and the company says, unlike amphetamines, the drug is not addictive. But one study showed dexfenfluramine caused brain damage when given to monkeys in high doses.
The concern is a possibility of memory changes, a possibility of mood changes, behavioral changes. And so some members of the committee have recommended that specific studies be done to look at this.
Studies have shown not only do most patients have to take the pills indefinitely to keep the weight off, they have to continue dieting and exercising. And some experts worry about the effect of giving new medications to a nation hungry for quick fixes. Eugenia Halsey, CNN, Washington.
Smokers who want to kick the habit may soon have a cheap new weapon. A federal drug advisory panel is recommending nicotine gum be available without a prescription. Nicorette would cost about the same as cigarettes and would include material to help smokers quit. The FDA has to give final approval.
For the first time, scientists have found a group of people at high risk for breast and ovarian cancer.
Researchers say Eastern European Jewish women are more likely to succumb to an inherited form of breast cancer. The finding could pave the way for testing and treatment.
CNN medical correspondent Jeff Levine reports.
45-year-old Ellen Passel's breast cancer ordeal was eased by her ties to the Jewish community.
I didn't cook a meal. People came over with meals. People called all the time. I discovered many women in the congregation who had also had breast cancer.
Now it appears that Jews of European origin, or Ashkenazis like Passel, have a much higher risk of breast and ovarian cancer than other people. While cancer risk has been observed in families, this is the first time researchers have found a specific group that is vulnerable to cancer. Most of the 7 million Jews in the U.S. are of European descent.
In studying our families in the lab, we found that 3 unrelated individuals had the same mutation.
After the so-called BRCA1 breast cancer gene was isolated last year, scientists in Israel and the United States found something striking. 1% of 850 genetic samples analyzed contained a dangerous defect. Researcher Francis Collins compared the discovery to finding a single spelling error in a large book.
There is a specific misspelling that turns up over and over again at a surprisingly high frequency of about 1 in 100.
This population is 5 times more likely to carry the flawed gene. Only about 5 to 10% of breast cancer patients inherit their disease, but among those who carry the BRCA1 gene, the chances of getting the tumor are 90%. Next up, a study of 5,000 Jews in the Washington, D.C. area to see how many carry the potentially fatal gene. But that doesn't necessarily mean they should be tested, since there is no cure, and a positive result could lead to genetic discrimination in insurance and employment.
Speaking for myself, I am going to say that in my judgment, the results presented today are not cause for Ashkenazi Jewish women to seek private breast cancer testing.
Based on this new information about the breast cancer gene, it's possible for private companies to develop a test. But researchers here at NIH hope that women will wait until more is known about the gene before trying to determine if they are at risk. Jeff Levine, CNN, Bethesda, Maryland.
Mistakes can be costly.
Especially when they involve your pension. Many people could be losing big bucks to pension problems which are not their fault. Find out what you can do to protect yourself.
World News is brought to you by Pepsid AC Acid Controller. You can be heartburn-free with new Pepsid AC.
My doctor just told me I'll never have to worry about heartburn like my mother.
No antacids, Tums, or Malox?
No, he said there was something brand new. Nothing like antacids. It's called Pepsid AC Acid Controller.
Pepsid AC?
This one little Pepsid AC pill stops heartburn, then controls acid an incredible 9 hours.
9 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's all day.
Well, now you won't need those antacids you're always taking. And new Pepsid AC can prevent heartburn from ever starting.
So I can have linguine and clam sauce again.
And live the way we want.
Live the way we want.
Pepsid, the prescription that's helped millions, is now available in non-prescription strength for heartburn and acid indigestion. You can be heartburn-free with new Pepsid AC.
Tylenol Extended Relief.
They named it Tylenol Extended Relief because it's extended relief.
I can't give it a better name than Tylenol Extended Relief because that's what it does.
Remember, it's Tylenol Extended Relief.
Perfect name, great product.
A sparkling ship on crystal waters is coming. Absolutely gorgeous. It was so much fun. The perfect lobster is coming.
Our waiters, they would do anything for us, any time.
Perfection is coming.
A gift from the captain.
Memories are coming. 7 days in Royal Caribbean's Caribbean are coming. You've got some Royal Caribbean coming.
Well, many people work years to receive a pension only to get much less than they had anticipated.
Beverly Shook reports payment errors are common and correcting them can be quite an ordeal.
After 9 years of working for a Florida dentist, Joanne Zeiler was ready to move on and collect her company pension.
He presented me with a letter that he wanted me to sign so he wouldn't be responsible for anything, and said he owed me $268.
Joanne didn't sign that letter or the next one the dentist offered, which upped the amount to $1,560. After a year of struggling to recover her retirement dollars, Joanne contacted the National Center for Retirement Benefits, the NCRB. The pension consulting firm secured what was really due, $20,000. Problems like Joanne's are common, but experts say they are usually unintended.
If you were to put all the rules and regulations together from end to end, it could be 60,000 pages. And the administrative staff of companies have a difficult time following what to do.
Frequent payment errors include misstating years of service, improper investment of a plan's assets by its trustees, failure to include bonuses into calculations. Employers are required to provide annual statements on a plan's finances, and most must supply individual benefit statements once a year upon request.
A warning I would give to people is save every piece of paper that ever has the word pension on it.
Employees can appeal pension payments, but getting help is not cheap. NCRB charges no upfront fees, but exacts a hefty commission, 50% of the money they recover. Lawyers specializing in pension law are another option. The Department of Labor advises employees of their rights, but their pension advisors cannot delve into each of the 200,000 inquiries they receive a year. That's your money. Beverly Shook, CNN Business News, New York.
Some stories now making headlines from the political page. Republicans and Democrats came to a quick accord in the House to prevent a government shutdown for the next 6 weeks while they wrangle over a host of other budget issues. The Senate is expected to do the same tomorrow. Democrats say Republican plans to revamp Medicare are beginning to unravel. Hearings on the medical plan have been pushed back to mid-October. But House Speaker Newt Gingrich says everything is on track and Democrats are just trying to scare older Americans. A new CNN USA Today Gallup poll shows Colin Powell could be the big winner if Ross Perot creates a new political party. Given Powell as the Republican nominee, Perot would come in third behind the former Joint Chiefs chairman and President Clinton, who finishes second.
Threat is one of those words that perks up most people's ears, and when that word gets tossed around on Capitol Hill, you can just about bet on some serious sound and fury. This time, it's an all-Republican affair. CNN's Bob Franken reports on crime and punishment, Newt Gingrich style.
It's not that political leaders don't use threats, politely called arm twisting, all the time. House Speaker Newt Gingrich is spending most of his time keeping his Republican troops from scattering, just as they near the end of the year's long lockstep legislative march. Democrats got their hands on a memo describing threats he was suggesting. But Gingrich insists there were no threats.
Oh, it doesn't say that at all. You have to read the memo very carefully.
In fact, the memo reads, Newt then proceeded to issue threats that he can use. It was written to Majority Whip Tom DeLay to describe a private leadership meeting about Republicans on House agriculture who were resisting the party's farm bill. According to the memo, after the Speaker said they are not outlaws, it continued, he outlined the threats. 1, Baker will be taken off and put on transportation, meaning Louisiana Republican Richard Baker. 2, Emerson will not become chairman if Roberts runs for the Senate. That's Missouri's Bill Emerson. And as for Texas Republican Larry Combest, 3, Combest will be stripped of Intelligence Committee chairmanship.
I said explicitly, these are not outlaws, these are our members. I did say we then reviewed what are all the different options.
Democrats obviously were putting a different spin on it.
People are being bludgeoned, apparently, into voting for things that they think are against the best interest of their constituents.
Option, threat, whatever, it didn't work. The Republicans voted against the legislation in committee. Each said there was no threat.
This was a nice young staff member writing a memo for Tom DeLay that managed to grossly exaggerate the conversation.
That staff member is now trying to explain not only the memo, but how in heaven's name it got in Democrats' hands. Bob Franken, CNN, Capitol Hill.
My mom and dad are buying a home, so I get my own room all to myself. Mom says after we move in, I could fix mine up any way I want. And if my sister wants to bug me or something, she'll have to knock first.
Lisa, there you are. Come on, let's go.
At Fannie Mae, we're the nation's largest source of funds for mortgage lenders. Call us for a free guide to help you find the mortgage that's right for you.
If you've been drinking Ensure, there's a little something you should know. Soft-A-Cal has more protein, less fat, and about twice as much calcium. No, Soft-A-Cal can't add years to your life, but it might help add life to your years.
Hey, hey, good looking. What you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Hey, sweet baby, don't you think maybe we could find us a brand new recipe?
Get our 16-page cookbook for just $3. Call 1-800-585-MENU.
Still hard to believe that as long as 15 months ago, 2 murders captured the nation's attention, a sports hero was arrested, and the case has since taken on a life of its own.
Some Americans are obsessed with every detail, tuning in every day for more of what's become OJ TV. And now, it's almost over. CNN's Paul Verkaman reports.
In Atlanta, the subject du jour between bites, the O.J. Simpson trial heading toward a climax.
The interest that has built up over the time period, we'd like to see what the summation is.
I mean, we're more interested in the closing arguments and everything else. Everything else was so drawn out that now, you know, they're cutting to the chase.
The saga of O.J. Simpson started with this chase, now the conclusion, the closing arguments, and impending verdict. It's hooking viewers much the same as the Gulf War did, according to one television critic.
In the next 2 weeks, there will be quite a spike for ratings for this trial. And leading up to the ultimate event, the announcement of the verdict. And then it'll all go right back down.
They're watching in suburban Nutley, New Jersey, where Thomas Banks has seen almost all of the closing arguments.
It's just a fascinating, frustrating trial. I guess you get hung up on it, as I've found.
When you just look at the facts,
it seems like it's more interesting than whatever primetime shows they do have on now.
The Simpson closing arguments have extended into prime time in the Eastern Time Zone. But a sampling of East Coast stations and top market shows, they are staying with regular network programming in this critical period for launching new...
He's never here.
On cable, Court TV, E! and CNN are showing all of the closing arguments, with CNN reporting an average of 1 million more homes tuned into the network than last week, up 386% over last year. The peak viewership of the O.J. Simpson case is here in Los Angeles. One station executive estimates that up to 3 million area viewers spread out over several channels may be watching the Simpson case conclusion.
Virtually all of the commercial stations in Los Angeles are carrying it from beginning to end. And I think if you didn't, people would wonder why not. It's a big story.
The issue is how they fit.
At the airport in Burbank, an entertainment industry town, it's O.J. all day.
Very interesting aspect of show business.
Now it's more to the technical side of the trial, and it's really neat to get into that, the DNA and all that kind of fun stuff.
Whether captivated or jaded,
I'm only watching because I have to, and I'm sitting here in the airport.
Viewers of the Simpson trial are now united by the belief that the end is near. Paul Verkaman, CNN, Los Angeles.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lyndon Soles.
And I'm Bobby Batista. Up next, our half-hour recap of highlights from the trial.
On the premiere of CNN's Burden of Proof, Simpson attorney Johnny Cochran is the guest. 12:30 Eastern, the day after the jury gets the case.
It's a giant used car clearance. Tasco Lincoln Mercury's Used Car Center has reduced the price of every single car for September's used car sellout. Prices from $79.95. Save up to $15,000 on Lincoln Town Cars. Save up to $7,000 on Mercury Sables, Villagers, Cougars, Grand Marquis, other domestic models too. Every used car is clearance priced at Tasco Lincoln Mercury's Used Car Center, 200 Fall River Avenue in Seacon.
Baker comes up with incredible new pretzel. Doesn't have any customers. Doesn't know how to reach them. Here's the post office has some very smart solutions. Calls for business kits. Baker finds ad mail can target pretzel lovers. Doesn't cost much. Gets his message across. Baker gets orders. Sends them parcel post. Customers are impressed. Baker gets more orders. Pretzels are a hit. Baker makes millions. Now he's the one getting baked. For information, call 1-800-USPS.
CBS has moved
To Channel 12.
So if you want action,
And who doesn't?
you're on.
And if you want laughs, you're on.
They're right here.
On Channel 12. It's really very simple.
CBS has a new home.
So keep one number in mind.
12.
12.
It all adds up to great TV.
In southern New England. So for all your favorite CBS shows,
You're on.
You're on WPRI, Channel 12.
The new home of CBS.
Any questions?
It's the best compact sport utility vehicle in initial quality. It's 4Runner. And the best time to get one is now. It's Toyota's nationwide clearance. Your Toyota dealer is offering 4Runner leases. Nicely equipped at only $299 a month. It's your chance to get the last of the new 95. There's a big selection, but hurry. If you want the ultimate SUV, check out Land Cruiser. Now with dual airbags. It's Toyota's nationwide clearance. Don't miss it.
This is CNN.
That's genocidal racism. Is that ethnic purity? What is that? What is that? We're paying this man's salary to espouse these views. You think he only told Kathleen Bell, whom he just had met? You think he talked to his partners about it? You think his commanders knew about it? You think everybody knew about it and turned their heads? Nobody did anything about it.
A feverish closing argument puts racism and police misconduct, not murder, as the focus of the O.J. Simpson trial. And that focus immediately sparks outrage from the father of victim Ronald Goldman, prompting the defendant's family to demand, who is he to judge? Hello, I'm Bobby Batiste at CNN Center, and welcome to this special half hour of highlights from day 158 at the O.J. Simpson double murder trial, the last chance for Simpson to state his case. The topic of murder did not get top billing in Johnny Cochran's fiery closing arguments at the Simpson trial. The fight against racism and political misconduct did. Cochran's oratory was wide-ranging and at times angry. He borrowed from biblical texts and compared one police detective to Adolf Hitler. The emotional summation was targeted at 9 African Americans on the 12-person jury. Cochran implored the panel to, in his words, do the right thing and acquit his client as a civil rights gesture.
Please don't compromise your principles or your consciences in rendering this decision. Don't rush to judgment. Don't compound what they've already done in this case. Don't rush to judgment. Have a judgment that is well thought out. One that you can believe in. The morning after this verdict, I want you to place yourself the day after you render the verdict. When you get up and you look in the mirror and you're free, you're no longer sequestered. You probably look for each other, but you know, you'll be happy to be home again. But what's important is, look in that mirror and say, have I been true to my oath? Did I do the right thing? Was I naive? Was I timid? Or was I courageous? Did I believe in the Constitution? Did I believe in justice? Did I do my part for integrity and honesty? That's the mission you're on in this journey toward justice.
Johnny Cochran also attacked the prosecution's theory that a long and violent relationship between O.J. Simpson and his wife, Nicole Brown, culminated in murder. Deputy District Attorney Christopher Darden had compared the defendant to a simmering fuse that was finally extinguished the night of June 12, 1994, with the murders of his ex-wife and Ron Goldman. Cochran says that's a figment of the prosecution's imagination.
So we get all the way back past May into June, and there is no trigger, there is no fuse, there's nothing going on. The only fuse, the only trigger is in Mr. Darden's mind. The evidence isn't there, and they spent all this time about motive. There is none. You put this in perspective. Absence of motive tends to establish innocence. That's what the jury instruction says. Evidence of other offenses are introduced for a very limited portion in this case. And the bottom line is, the positive thing in this man's life, the good days, far outweigh the bad days. And in your life, in all of our lives, we just hope at the end, when we must ultimately meet our makers, that the good days have outweighed the bad days.
Johnny Cochran looked to the Bible as he continued his attack on police detectives Mark Furman and Philip Van Adder. He spoke of trust, and the bond, he says, was shattered forever by dishonest actions in the police department.
It goes to the core of this case. When you're lying at the beginning, you'll be lying at the end. The book of Luke talks about that. Talks about if you're untruthful in small things, you should be disbelieved in big things. There's no question about that. We've known that all along. So this man, with his big lies, and then we have Furman coming right on the heels, and the two of them need to be paired together because they are twins of deception. Furman and Van Adder, twins of deception, will bring you a message that you cannot trust, that you cannot trust.
In a powerful segment of speech that keyed in on the issues of race and power, Johnny Cochran suggested that jurors with the right character could vote only one way, to acquit O.J. Simpson.
A racist is somebody who has power over you, who can do something to you. People could have views, but keep them to themselves. But when they have power over you, that's when racism becomes insidious. That's what we're talking about here. He has power. A police officer in the street, a patrol officer, is the single most powerful figure in the criminal justice system. He can take your life. Unlike the Supreme Court, you don't have to go through all these appeals. He can do it right there and justify it. And that's why this has to be rooted out in the LAPD and every place else. Make up a reason, because he made a judgment. That's what happened in this case. They made a judgment. Everything else after that was going to point toward O.J. Simpson. They didn't want to look at anybody else. Mr. Darden asked, who did this crime? That's their job as the police. We've been hampered. They turned down our offers for help, but that's the prosecution's job. The judge says, we don't have that job. The law says that. We'd love to help do that. Who do you think wants to find these murderers more than Mr. Simpson? But that's not our job. It's their job. And when they don't talk to anybody else, when they rush to judgment in their obsession to win, that's why this became a problem. This man had the power to carry out his racist views. And that's what's so troubling. Let's move on. Making up a reason. That's troubling. That's frightening. That's chilling. But if that wasn't enough, the thing that really gets you is she goes on to say, Officer Furman went on to say that he would like nothing more than to see all niggers gathered together and killed. He said something about burning them or bombing them. I was too shaken to remember the exact words he used. However, I do remember that what he said was probably the most horrible thing I'd ever heard someone say. What frightened me even more was that he was a police officer, sworn to uphold the law. And now we have it. There was another man not too long ago in the world who had those same views, who wanted to burn people, who had racist views and ultimately had power over people in his country. People didn't care. People said he's just crazy, he's just a half-baked painter. They didn't do anything about it. This man, this scourge became one of the worst people in the history of this world, Adolf Hitler, because people didn't care, didn't try to stop him. He had the power over his racism and his anti-religionism. Nobody wanted to stop him, and it ended up in World War II, the conduct of this man. And so, Furman, to take all black people now and burn them or bomb them. That's genocidal racism. Is that ethnic purity? What is that? What is that? We're paying this man's salary to espouse these views. You think he only told Kathleen Bell, whom he just had met? You think he talked to his partners about it? You think his commanders knew about it? You think everybody knew about it and turned their heads? Nobody did anything about it. Things happen for a reason in your life. Maybe this is one of the reasons we're all gathered together here this day. 1 year and 2 days after we met. Maybe there's a reason for your purpose. Maybe this is why you were selected. There's something in your background and your character that helps you understand this is wrong. Maybe you're the right people at the right time, at the right place to say no more. We're not going to have this. This is wrong. What they've done to our client is wrong. This man, O.J. Simpson, is entitled to an acquittal. You cannot believe these people. You can't trust the message. You can't trust the messengers. It's about the lengths to which he would go to get somebody, black, and also white if they associated with black.
Cochran wrapped up his morning arguments with words of empowerment for the jury. He told them they had the keys to O.J. Simpson's freedom.
This is a case about an innocent man wrongfully accused. You've seen him now for a year and 2 days. You observed him through the good times and the bad times. Soon, it'll be your turn. You have the keys to his future. You have the evidence by which you can acquit this man. You have not only the patience, but the integrity and the courage to do the right thing. We believe you'll do the right thing. And the right thing is to find this man not guilty of both of these charges.
When we come back, a deliberate dissection of what prosecutors call a mountain of evidence. Simpson's attorneys call it a cancer at the heart of this case.
It's the X14 Challenge. Today we're asking shoppers to compare their Dow to X14 soap scum remover.
X14 side is very clean, squeaky clean. This is much better.
X14 soap scum remover.
X14 some powerful stuff.
Helen Yates is 96. Her life is full of family and laughter. Though for years, she battled severe high blood pressure. With proper care and medicine we developed at Pfizer, Helen was able to go on. To Norway at 79, the West Indies at 93, and now Paris. Pfizer, we're part of the cure.
My folks are here. These Super 8 motel rooms are roomy.
At these prices, we'll never leave.
Super 8 Motels, 1-800-800-8000. So affordable, so comfortable.
Imagine an automobile engineered to such precise tolerances, it feels as if it were formed from a single piece of steel. Introducing the all-new 1996 Mercury Sable. The all-new Mercury Sable. Imagine something better.
Imagine yourself in a Mercury. I can't play this thing!
Having problems, baby?
Hey!
Beating up on you, Banjo. Welcome aboard.
Hey, bro, you do it?
Oh, bang! Kung Fu fighting!
The answer is Carl Douglas. Next stop, Barry's World.
Music, just one of the many interest groups you'll find in the new Prodigy. Call 1-800-PRODIGY for software.
In the beginning, the world was one big global market. Then the continents split apart. Landmass separated from landmass. Nation separated from nation. And international trade became almost impossible. Then businesses began moving to Fairfax County, Virginia, and the trend was reversed. Regular international flights and global communications networks brought the world closer, and by the 21st century, it was one big global market again.
Soon, CNN will bring you a whole new weekday lineup. beginning at 12:30 Eastern with the premiere of Burden of Proof with special guest Johnny Cochran. Then the latest news and information on an all-new CNN Today. At 3, spend an hour with Susan Rook on Talkback Live. And at 4, the people who are making things happen in Washington on Inside Politics. All weekdays after the closing arguments on CNN.
It was up to Simpson attorney Barry Scheck to tear apart the scientific case the prosecution had built, and that's what he tried to do, bloodstain by bloodstain. Almost from the moment the bodies were discovered, Simpson and his supporters have argued that there is something wrong with the evidence. And Scheck attacked it attacked it all as contaminated, compromised, corrupted, and covered up.
Now, if Miss Mazzola had known since June 14th that she had carried this out in a plastic bag, because she realized it looking at that at the next moment, how come nobody was told this? Why didn't somebody know this? Why didn't they interview these witnesses before they got on the stand for 8-10 days apiece? And this was obviously a crucial problem, because there's something wrong here. And of course, when she ultimately testified, poor Miss Mazzola had to go over and sit on the couch and close her eyes for 20 minutes because she was tired and didn't see what went on in the foyer. Now look, I'd submit to you, I don't think that's all credible evidence. I think there's something really wrong here, but, you know, you don't even need it, really, if you think about it. Because in terms of access and opportunity, all that really matters is what nobody can deny. And that is Detective Van Adder is walking around with a May 10th envelope that he should have sealed and he should have booked for 3 hours at least, unaccounted for. What is going on? There's something wrong. It's not coincidence. There's something wrong, terribly wrong. You cannot convict when the core of the prosecution's case is built on perjurious testimony of police officers, unreliable forensic evidence, and manufactured evidence. It is a cancer at the heart of this case, and that's what this evidence shows. When you go through it patiently, when you go through it carefully, when you go through scientifically, logically, that's what the evidence shows. And you cannot convict on that evidence. There are many, many reasonable doubts buried right in the heart of the scientific evidence in this case, and we have demonstrated them. And we don't have to prove them, but the evidence shows it. So, in the words of Dr. Lee, something is wrong. Something is terribly wrong with the evidence in this case. You cannot trust it. It lacks integrity. It cannot be a basis for a verdict of beyond a reasonable doubt. There is something wrong. There's something terribly wrong about this evidence. Somebody manufactured evidence in this case. There's missing blood. There's EDTA. There's questions, serious, deeply troubling questions. You must distrust it. You have to distrust it. You cannot render a verdict in this case of beyond a reasonable doubt on this kind of evidence. Because if you do, no one's safe. No one. The Constitution means nothing. This cannot, will not, shall not happen in this country with you good people. It just won't.
Johnny Cochran then wrapped up by turning the tables. He said starting June 12th of last year, O.J. Simpson and his family became victims in this case.
The other side, of course, we submitted answering the questions that O.J. Simpson was at home getting ready for his trip. He had no problem with his ex-wife. He had gone to this concert. She had gotten the tickets for him. There's no argument. Nobody's come in here, so they had any argument that day. There's no fight. They talked earlier, made arrangements for the tickets. He went to the concert. You saw him at the concert. You traced his steps that day and what he did. And then he went on to Chicago and came back immediately. And everything he did was consistent with innocence. This case is a tragedy for everybody. Certainly the victims and their families. For the Simpsons family, they're victims too because they lost the ex-daughter-in-law. For the defendant, he's been in custody since June of 1994 for a crime that he didn't commit. Someone has taken these children's mother. I certainly hope that your decision doesn't take their father and that justice is finally achieved in this case.
Detective Tom Lang told CNN that defense charges of a police conspiracy and cover-up are out-and-out lies. And Deputy District Attorney Christopher Darden said prosecutors would be up late tonight folding the latest defense contradictions into their final presentation to the jury. The impassioned pleas from Simpson's lawyers outraged one of those in the courtroom, and his reaction prompted Simpson's normally reserved relatives to lash back. That's all next.
It's no surprise there's a printer in town who can print memo pads and invoices. But what might surprise you is that the same printer can also do multicolor printing, presentation materials, high-volume copying, and everything you see here. An even bigger surprise is that this very same printer is right around the corner. Pip Printing. You'll be surprised at what we can do. Order 1,000 or more carbonless business forms and get 500 more of the same free.
These days, more and more people are doing things they never imagined before. People who never imagined a minivan could drive like a car are driving the Mercury Villager. People who never imagined how much fun driving could be are driving the Mercury Mystique. And people who never imagined a car could look and feel this solid are driving the all-new Mercury Sable.
Imagine yourself in a Mercury.
This bank works like business works. To do a good job. To take your business personally. To come up with solutions. To act, not just react. To innovate. To specialize in you. To earn your business. To get the job done. Comerica. We listen. We understand. We make it work.
There's a right way and a wrong way to cut fresh flowers. Cutting a stem in the open air can block moisture from getting to the flower. So always cut your flowers underwater with a sharp knife at an angle. And be sure your flowers come from 1-800-Flowers, because we've developed a 10-step freshness care system that will keep your arrangements fresh for a week, guaranteed. At 1-800-Flowers, we're always on the cutting edge. Just call our name or visit our stores.
A love tormented, forbidden, forever. Turner Network Television is proud to present, complete in 2 nights, Richard Chamberlain, Rachel Ward, The Thornbirds. Begins Tuesday night at 8 on TNT.
Sunday, on the next CNN Presents. The heartrending story of 3 couples, each desperately seeking a child to call their own.
You almost feel like they're going to the highest bidder.
Prepared to face the endless red tape and legal nightmares of adoption.
That nobody wants a boy. That was heartbreaking for me, and that's when I finally lost it.
They'll do whatever it takes to win the baby chase. On the next CNN Presents, Sunday, 9 Eastern.
On the premiere of CNN's Burden of Proof, Simpson attorney Johnny Cochran with trial stories from the inside. He's the guest on the Burden of Proof premiere, 12:30 Eastern, the day after the jury gets the case.
Since June 12th of last year, the families of Nicole Brown Simpson, Ronald Goldman, and O.J. Simpson have been on an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. At times during this trial, relatives of the victims have spoken about their pain and lashed out at the man that they believe is responsible. But Thursday, the father of Ron Goldman focused his anger instead on Simpson's lead attorney, who during closing arguments had compared former Detective Mark Furman to Adolf Hitler.
This man is a horror walking around amongst us, and he compares what Mark Furman did to misery from the beginnings of history. This man ought to be ashamed of himself to walk amongst decent human beings. This man is a disgrace to human beings. No. He is one of the most disgusting human beings I have ever had to listen to in my life.
Goldman's outburst prompted the defendant's normally reserved family to break its silence and come to the defense attorney's defense.
It's very shocking that once Johnny gets up and starts telling what we feel happened, that this has rocked somebody's world. I think it's time for everybody to wake up and realize that we are in a for real world, and we have dealt with racism all our lives, every single day. And if someone cannot accept the fact that we have Mark Furmans walking around in this world who has collected all of the vital evidence, and they say that he is not important in this case, they're living in a fantasy world.
Others agree with Goldman that Cochran went too far. Two Jewish groups call his Furman to Hitler analogy insulting and demeaning, and various leaders argue it had no place in this trial.
There seems to be at least, 2 or 3 different crowds that are being played to. One is a statement being made to members of his own community that empowers them, and that he's standing up for their rights, and to turn this into an issue of race, where I believe that most citizens of our city here don't see this crime as an issue of race at all, but as a human tragedy. And Johnny Cochran knows better. He's a better lawyer than that. And in our brief statement, we just said we hope he doesn't revisit that kind of commentary in the future. It is inappropriate. That behavior is inappropriate.
The Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith added its voice, calling Cochran's comparison outrageous. Well, Friday could be it. If the prosecution is on track and wraps up its rebuttal segment of closing arguments, Judge Lancito could give final instructions and put the case in the jury's hands. Thanks for watching. I'm Bobby Batista. CNN will, of course, bring you live coverage of the closing arguments, set for noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.
On the premiere of CNN's Burden of Proof, Simpson attorney Johnny Cochran is the guest. 12:30 Eastern, the day after the jury gets the case.
It happens only once a year, a Toyota nationwide clearance. The best time to get the best. Avalon, starting at only $23,400. Avalon, Toyota's flagship, is built in America. Get a year-end low lease on Previa, starting at $299 a month. Now's the best time to see your Toyota dealer. They're clearing out the last of the new 95s. To get the deal and the selection on the Toyota you want, you better hurry. Toyota's nationwide clearance event happens only once a year.
Are you ready for some big news?
I'm ready.
Then you're on. CBS has moved to Channel 12.
So if you want Murphy Brown,
You're on. Chicago Hope, you're on.
and The Nanny, you can find us all on
12. They're all right here.
on 12.
So if you're looking for...
Picket fences.
Dave's World.
Did someone mention The Nanny?
She's very persistent.
You're on WPRI, Channel 12.
And so are all your favorite CBS stars.
I love it here.
In 1915, Max Shore opened Max Shore's Market. His son Irving carried on the tradition of quality and satisfaction. Today, almost 80 years later, the Shore tradition continues. In the produce department, with fresh, crispy, nutritious fruits and vegetables. For 4 generations, at Shore's, the more things change.
And this is how we check our prices.
The more they remain the same.
Can I try Uncle Joe?
Sure.
Shore's Fresh Food Market. The tradition continues.
I've seen folks walk into our showroom for the first time who really seem surprised to be treated so well.
makes me wonder how our competition